It's Dr. Tennant's Verbal Highs. Let's start the show with Lewis Tennant. Here we go. Guests and interviews that you're looking for with creators, innovators, and so much more. For all episodes and further info, verbalhighs.com is the place to go.
Welcome to Dr. Tennant's Verbal Highs, a podcast from Tamaki Makaurau, Auckland, New Zealand. Kia ora, my name is Lewis. I'm the host of the show. Welcome back if you are a regular or a occasional dropper-buyer, and welcome if you're new and here to hear what Chris Graham has to chat about over 80 minutes, and what was a lovely chat. He was a very generous guest. I'll get to that in a second. I'm going to keep it pretty brief on the intro today. Who listens to these things anyway? Very busy, very busy, about to go and finish off what they, modern parlance, what they call a flip. The balcony in the place that I purchased about 2.5-3 years ago, my first ever property, an apartment with an unfeasibly large inner city balcony, nearly 40 square metres. In fact, we put the turf down on it last weekend. Before you go, that's an environmental tragedy. There was no way grass was going to grow there. Don't even get pollinators through in the middle of the city. So I'm actually going to be looking for wind pollinating plants fairly shortly, but that's another story. But then I also put up a kit set in conjunction, well, very much with me being the assistant to a registered master builder, may I add. Thank you, James. Put that up yesterday, but I need to get up on a ladder and put the louvers in. And I'm also one of those points, you know, with work or life or whatever, at some point, well, maybe this isn't true of everyone, but probably a lot of the busier people I know, sometimes it's actually quite unhealthy. I think you can't switch your projects off in your head. And I'm going through that phase at the moment since I started working on this podcasting summit that's coming up, this gathering of whoever should decide to attend from the New Zealand podcast community. It's kind of open to anyone who is a podcaster or involved with podcasting. Probably a lot of you, most of you, in fact, you know, maybe nearly all of you are just enjoyers and listeners of podcasts, and that's fine. But I'm still putting it out there because if you know of a local podcaster in New Zealand, someone who is, you know, involved with the production or in any way with podcasting, and this sounds like an event they might be interested in, you can go to nzpodsummit.com. At the moment, there's just a placeholder website there because I think nobody needs a vicious marketing campaign at the end of 2021. Plus, to be honest, there's still a bit of organisational stuff going on, but there's a wee placeholder there, and that links you to the social media, which is also live and also just a kind of an interested party gathering operation at the moment, and then the event will launch proper in January. But I can tell you there's a bunch of panels that will be happening, as well as keynotes and workshops and stuff. But on the panels, I would like more females who are podcasters or podcast adjacent. So if that sounds like anyone you know, perhaps even yourself, or even just in general, if you want to get in touch about this event that's happening at AUT in Auckland in May on the 14th next year, you can email nzpodsummit@gmail.com. Yes, so, you know, for those of you new, I work at AUT, and so I guess officially I'm an academic later in life, and I can tell you it's not all swanning around in a beret, pondering the finer points of Nietzsche. You do get busy with things like this, and they take over. But hopefully once I get the website up, I'll be relaxed about it. Anyway, thanks, Chris. Very generous guest. Of course, we talk about his, at least from the public's point of view, his latest project. I'm not sure exactly what he's working on now or what order he finishes things in, but everyone's been talking about that Scribe doco that Chris Graham directed, so we have a chat about that and about Scribe in general. Amazing story, really a triumph of a series that probably wouldn't have got made if it was going to go on regular old telly a few years ago. It's up on TVNZ on demand, and I think kind of probably preaching to the choir, because during the podcast Chris mentions the numbers that it's it's attracted already, and it's fantastic. What a success. And also, and look, hello, what a career in terms of Chris. Probably, so much we didn't cover or talk about, but the other kind of thing he's very well known for publicly is Sione's Wedding. So we cover that, and then there's join the dots in between his time in New York, coming up as a filmmaker in the early, in and around early 90s hip hop, which influenced his. Well, he was already a hip hop head, but it influenced, coming back and making like quite a lot of, as I say in the podcast, I suggest like the Trinity Roots videos, some quite iconic New Zealand music videos. So do a bit of a deep dive on Chris, I reckon. Go back and watch some of those music videos attached to his name. And definitely another thing that's come on up more recently that probably hasn't had the same widespread notoriety as the Scribe doco, but is fantastic, and they're nice little, do you call them vignettes, little bite-sized stories, is there's a series that he made in conjunction with RNZ and a few other parties called New Zealand Hip Hop Stand Up, and you can find those on YouTube, and they're basically like about a particular New Zealand hip hop track and a wee story around its kind of creation or reception or stuff about it. So eloquent up till then. Get out of here, mate. My first guest ever comes up on the show, Thomas Watts, first episode about 5 years ago. God, I'd hate to go back and listen to those, but you should. You can see them all. You can see the whole project in terms of this podcast at verbalhighs.com. Some real estate on the internet is nice. Verbal Highs on Twitter to follow me, please. Verbal Highs Podcast on Facebook to follow me. And Verbal Highs on Apple and Google, where you can leave ratings and nice feedback and all that stuff. It's also on Spotify and iHeartRadio. Basically, I make a whole lot of content in my spare time and spend money doing so, and then I give it to large multinational corporations. But I'm glad you guys enjoy them. Thank you very much, Chris.
Verbal High, straight down from up above.
I don't remember why, but I came to your place in Kingsland back years ago, and I have a feeling it was to get a chili plant. Does that sound right?
Yeah. Get on the mic. We'll talk about that. It's a good intro to the show.
Good. Let's have
chuck your headphones on.
Okay.
Yes. So, Chris, the chili plant story, which I was going to ask you at the end or talk to you about.
Yeah. I
accosted you on. I've just forgotten the name of the road I lived on for 7 years, on Central Road in Kingsland. Oh, Chris, I've got a bunch of chili seedlings. I don't know what to do with them all. I think you were just parking your car, and I got you to come in down the hallway, and I gave you a ghost chili plant and said, good luck with that.
Right. I remember that, but I can't remember how it came about, because I also have a memory of being at Portland Public House.
Yeah.
And I was doing a Dads with Vinyl night, and you were like walking by because it was your hood, and you came in and had a drink, and we chatted, and there was a bunch of people there.
Did I lend you needles for the turntables for that? It's all coming back to me now.
Yeah, maybe that happened. Maybe I was totally stuck. Like I got down there and they didn't have needles. I can't remember.
So I think those two events are unrelated. But yes, I lived on Central Road in Kingsland for 7 years. It was a great spot. Yeah. Nice landlord and all of that. But like I talked to you about off mic, the opportunity to like finally have my own property, like it's great. Yeah. And I mean, look at how many people have a balcony like that.
I know, it's flash. It's like the Viaduct people. You should see it.
Did the chili plant survive?
Yeah. It went for a while, and it was after I randomly, like literally impulsively, entered the chili eating competition at Hallertau.
Yeah,
and it was through my mate Dave Johnson, and I was going to go anyways. Slave was DJing it.
I think he emceed it as well.
Yeah, that's right. And it was kind of hilarious hearing all the themes from Drop It Like It's Hot to Ring of Fire to every other, like, it was like a pun
Serato, man.
Of
it's so handy these days instead of a crate. But so
great.
You got some fruit off it, you got some chilies off it?
Yeah, got lots. And I was eating a lot at that time, and somehow Otis Frizzell was linked too. Did he get some?
No, I dropped him a plant. I drove to, because I just put a thing up on Facebook, so I dropped one.
I think that's what it was.
Oh
right.
My God,
and then I
got
said,
a family out
yes,
there.
Please, can I have one too? And that's how we relinked.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, anyway, it's funny.
Great. So,
we bonded through inflamed stomach lining.
I got to say one last thing. For all the reading I did and everything, I don't think they were real ghost chilies, because they weren't like unbearable, but they actually had a really beautiful flavour. I ended up making a bunch of sauces. I froze a whole lot.
Oh, awesome!
And anyway, so welcome. And I think I said to you, ask a busy person to whatever that idiom is. Like, you ask a busy person if you want something done. And you and I have both just had quite a busy day because we've been checking in with each other, pushing the time back. So I thought I'd start with, what does a typical day look like in the life of Chris?
A juggle, basically. I'm a combination of being a single dad of 3 kids and being a freelance filmmaker and just the mental and organizational requirement of juggling those things at the same time. So I have my kids half the time. I co-share them with my ex, and but that need of literally every day scheduling what the kids need done, what I need done, work. Through lockdown, it's been Zoom calls and everything else, and then things like this. So even when you, as an example, but when you said, when can you do it? I was like, let's check in Monday, Tuesday. Not sure what my working week looks like, but then when I saw the gap, I was like, I guess great. I initiated it with you and went, how's this? Does that work? What's your address? And that's just how I operate, because it's the only way to stay on top.
The way I typically start these is kind of getting a bit of a sense of kind of where you sprouted from. So, tell us the origin story. Where did you go to school? Where did you grow up?
Okay, well, I was born and raised in Wellington, and the rest of my family were actually from Auckland. Yeah. And it just so happened that my dad took a job in foreign affairs and diplomacy in Wellington, so they moved from Auckland to Wellington. I was born there and grew up in Karori, but I really did have a very lucky, and now in retrospect, lucky and privileged childhood. Not only white male privilege, but actually with Dad being a diplomat, we got posted overseas every 3 years. So when I was a kid, my brother and I complained like hell, like, it's not fair and it's so unjust.
Or us, we're travelling all around the world.
We're watching sunrise at the Taj Mahal, this sucks, It's like extraordinary. So in retrospect, I'm so blessed, like it really, and it has absolutely shaped the person I am, the way I view the world, my cultural fascination. Being just, a European mix, I'm just like really been drawn to Māoridom and Pacific Island cultures, and that's come through in a lot of my work. But also I've got to credit hip-hop culture for that, because it's my love of hip-hop, which means that I just happen to be a minority within that world. Just so lucky. So I guess getting back to it, I just... every 3 years, it was literally Wellington. We went to Ottawa for 3 years when I was a toddler, back to Wellington, then to Bangkok for 3 years. I would have been 8, 9, 10, and that was the most extreme culture shock.
So he was a New Zealand diplomat being posted as the New Zealand diplomat for whatever country he was in.
Exactly. Yeah. So for the Bangkok embassy, for example, and every posting he would go up the ladder per se of importance within the embassy and diplomacy.
It's a fascinating career to me. I mean, it wouldn't be to you because it's in the water. You grew up with it, but like, how does one even go on the path to becoming a diplomat?
Well, yeah.
A public servant? You kind of start off as a public servant?
As a public servant, exactly. And I guess you do your training and you start low and you learn the ropes and how to do the dance with, I guess a lot of it, like my childhood memories is like a lot of it was dinner parties and social gatherings and events either at, the cultural centre of that embassy or country overseas or whatever. And meanwhile, my mum, who studied social work and was a social worker in Lower Hutt, was always putting her career on pause to kind of be a mum and a diplomat's wife. And she did that to support my dad until it got to the point where she wanted to refocus on a career. He got posted to Geneva for final posting. And at that stage, my brother and I were at Onslow College and we were like, we don't want to go to Geneva. Like, I don't want to learn French and start all over again. Like, I'm embedded in my teenage years and friendships. And
I agree. That's a funny time to move, man. I reckon like your mid-teenage years, there's so much going on. It's just another layer of... And I suppose another thing, this is going to end up being a podcast about your old man, but the other thing that's probably come up at parties wherever when you've talked to people over the years, I'm fascinated by diplomatic immunity. Like, hopefully he never had to use that, but isn't that a weird... It's quite a weird law, right?
Oh, it is. Yeah, it is strange. I don't think he has gone there.
He hasn't used the get out of... It's a literal get out of jail free card.
No. Yeah, exactly. But there were times where we'd be like, for example, when he was in Geneva and I'd fly over there on my own, I'd be like 14 or 15, so kind of unaccompanied minor, technically, fly over there, felt very excited and responsible as a kid flying to Europe. And then I'd get there and I'd expect him to be on, like the other side where everybody else is waiting, but he'd be on like the front side of customs. So literally I'd go through customs or get my passport stamped and he'd be standing there on his own, like smiling and waiting for me and give me a big hug. And then we'd go down and get baggage claim and do whatever. And I'm like, how did you get up here?
That's like some spy movie shit, man, honestly.
A little bit. And even when I was a kid, people are like, so what does your dad do exactly? And I'll be like, he's a spy, because I didn't know how to describe it, you know.
Yeah, and so, that era, like, you've touched on a few things. Like, I think international travel was less of a given, particularly in New Zealand at the time for younger people. I always remember, like, the kid at school who'd been to America was, like, a real novelty.
Deal, yeah.
But I think another thing back then is that there was, I know, everyone knows this, there was far less access to technology, and particularly media-making technology, right?
Yeah.
So you've kind of... I've done a little bit of research today. You've wanted to do this kind of pretty much since you started your career. Where did the bug come from? Like, were you into the idea of filmmaking or moving image at high school, or did it come later?
I think my story is pretty typical to my generation and my age. I actually just turned 50 on Sunday.
I was going to ask. Thank you. I like to carbon date my guests. Yep, go on.
Yeah. How old are you? I won't say.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I'm 50, and so that's been a good introspective week or month, reflecting on life. But it's the same story as a lot of my generation, which is that I saw Star Wars at the Embassy Theatre and it blew my mind.
Right.
I would have been like 7, 8 years old, and I just went, I want to make movies, I want to make science fiction, like visual effects. Like, I just got so excitable. And I actually vividly remember the moment. It's interesting how you neurologically, your memories are random. You don't choose to select them. But I remember seeing parts of the movie, kind of being in the movie theatre, but actually coming home to Croy. Mum was home. I remember she was ironing. She's like, how was the movie, honey? And I'm like, Mum, it was incredible. It was and I just would not shut up. And I caught myself talking with such excitement that was the moment that I went, this is what I want to do. Like, it was actually probably 8 years old, and it felt like a calling, being too young to necessarily recognise it. But I could be just romantically remembering it, but it felt like that was the epiphany that made me go, I want to make movies. I don't know how, but this is what I want to do.
Yeah, it sounds like a solid memory to me. It makes sense, because you would have been 9 or 10, I reckon, when first Star Wars came out.
Yeah, I think around 8, but anyways, doesn't matter. Yeah,
and so you're at Onslow and a few years later, and also even through primary school. Like, again, the technology thing. I think there's probably those 16mm film projectors with National Film Unit films.
Yeah,
there might have been one video camera the size of a briefcase. Like, you know, did your parents buy you anything at the time? Like, did you have a camera? Or,
no,
because that's a real American thing, eh? You see those kids who manage to get hold of a camera and
totally,
yeah,
and they started young.
Yeah,
like, you know, I mean, Peter Jackson was like 8mm running around Pukerua Bay. So I mean, you do start that way. I guess for my era, when I knew I was excited in the 80s, when I was a teenager, it was basically having a VHS camera. Yeah. And to my parents' credit, although I also kind of complained at the time and was like, this is not fair, but they wouldn't buy me one. They said I had to earn one, and so I had part-time jobs and things. Yeah. But you know, VHS cameras were like $2,500 at the time. Yeah. It was just unfathomable. So I started saving, but I never quite got there. But I was that kid with basically an SLR camera, like a proper camera with a zoom lens. And as all my friends will attest to, it just went everywhere with me.
Was it that classic Pentax that everyone seemed, a lot of aspiring photographers wanted for a while?
I think it might have been a Nikon. I'm trying to remember, but it was just a
That's
decent...
right, Chris. Sorry, I'm pushing.
No, it's fine.
Details. But then also, like, it occurs to me now, you wouldn't have had... You have the VHS camera, which is, I mean, that's a pretty fly thing to have on the block, but you don't have editing facilities, right?
No, that's right.
So you're just doing the equivalent of pause tapes with DJing?
Yeah, that's exactly what happened. And actually, here, jumping ahead a little bit in the story.
You do what you want.
But on the VHS thing was, again, I didn't have it, but I was developing my eye with, I guess, my still camera. Every party I was at, I was like taking photos. I was that guy. I just took it everywhere. So I've got a ton of photos from my past, and that was back when you developed them at the chemist.
Yeah.
But basically, the final year, 7th form year, at that stage, my parents had separated. My dad took a job at a non-profit organisation in New York. And at the time, at ILM, there was only one film camera and one film teacher.
That's kind of what I was getting at.
And my dad was like, well, why don't you apply to film school in New York? You might as well just try. And I kind of was like so intimidated and excited by the concept of going to New York. So I borrowed the Onslow College school VHS video camera, like basically went to the principal, pitched to him the idea. Can I take it home on weekends?
Yeah.
I'll be really if there's any damage, I'll pay for it, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
Went home, made a short film over the weekends, incredibly profound film about a kid getting his head around the concept of death. And then, as you were saying before, I then had to borrow a VHS player, take it home, and do just like tape decks and cassettes with mixing. It was like play, pause, record, pause, play. record, pause. Oh my God, that looks terrible. Do it again. Okay, start from the beginning. Linear editing, like it took forever, and it had all of the digital breakouts and the, horizontal tearing that VHS tapes have.
Amazing.
But they didn't care, and that short film got me into NYU and also School of Visual Arts, which is actually the school I chose to go to. And then at 18, I moved to New York, and it all went down.
It's one of those topics that, like, there's kind of arguments and discussions both ways. Like, is being, is having that really limited access to technology, in other words, kind of being of our generation compared to now, does that breed, better producers and makers of things or not? It's like, I don't have an answer to it, but all I know is at my school, it's extraordinary. I could take you down the road after this. The school's just down the one block down, and you could make an easily professional releasable film for the facilities at my school.
God, yeah.
It's changed so much. But for the time when you got to New York, you obviously got in. And what was the film school, and like who were your contemporaries? Was it a large bunch of people that were in your intake, or?
Yeah, it was. So I went to School of Visual Arts, and no real notable filmmakers came out of there. Like Keith Haring was kind of like the one legend that had graduated from there. But I mean, when I got there, because I got into NYU, I literally balanced on the scales. Okay, which school do I go to? And in a nutshell, although NYU had the name, and all of my heroes like Scorsese and Spike Lee and Oliver Stone and all of these guys had gone there. They had all gone through the graduate school, whereas School of Visual Arts only had undergraduate school. So all the equipment and the cameras and all the learning was there. And I was like, well, I'm going to learn faster here, even though it doesn't have as big a name, but that doesn't matter.
Yeah.
And it was still massively expensive. Like I had to take out a $30,000 loan just to
adjusted for inflation. That's crazy.
Yeah. In the 90s, exactly. And so massive bank loan. And then, but there I was. It was like my dream come true because New York was the mecca of hip hop and the mecca of film, and I was 18, like wide-eyed.
What era? What years?
Oh, I arrived in 1990, so it was like the golden age of hip hop.
Just before it pops off in that New York hip hop, 90s. Yeah,
like I could go on about hip hop stories, but I saw like Biggie Smalls maybe his first appearance,
really
opening for De La Soul.
How many New Zealanders could say that?
Oh, and I that was in the first month that I got there, and I hadn't even started school. School started the first week, and I asked a couple of people if they wanted to go. Nobody wanted to go, and I was like, stuff it, I'm going on my own. And it was at the Roxy Theatre and the old Studio 54, and I was honestly one of the only white guys in there. And I sat up in the balcony, and it was like De La Soul, Third Base, and Jungle Brothers, and P. Diddy came out at the beginning. He's like, hey, everybody, I got a brand new artist, Notorious B.I.G. Everybody give it up for Biggie Smalls. And everybody's like, what? And everyone was into native tongues at the time. It was all about this like flower kind of era, Prince Paul, the whole thing. Yeah. And he came out with this like, crack Brooklyn rap.
Oh, true, because
like
it's kind of like you have those cycles. So we'd gone kind of NWA gangster rap, and then we'd gone into the Daisy Age.
Exactly.
And then kind of people are like, oh, wait, hang on, we're going back to that?
Yeah, and the crowd was there for like Jungle Brothers and Tribe, and Tribe was just starting out. Anyways, so
this guy comes with his damn hood raps.
And Biggie just did a few songs and honestly started getting booed. Like, nobody knew who he was. They booed him. And to his credit, he literally kind of like into the mic, fuck all y'all, and then dropped the mic on stage and walked off. And I was like, I saw Biggie, but I didn't know it until 15 years later.
You saw a Biggie mic drop moment too.
Exactly. Literally. He did. He was so pissed off. He was just like, yeah, crazy.
And you ended up spending... Oh, actually, one thing before I talk about how long you spent there, I find later in life, I've put it this way, how to frame this. I would find it much harder these days to just up and move cities. Like there's that kind of no fear thing about youth. What I'm getting at there is like when you got to New York, did you have anyone to hang out with, or like was there any moments of like, fuck, this is all quite big, or were you just kind of straight into it, as I say, with that kind of youthful?
Yeah, no, I was straight into it, and I guess I was used to. I essentially I'd had a childhood of started a new school, know nobody, and go make friends, and it was like massively intimidating. True, and it's still, if we get into like, your own insecurities and everything else, it's like my childhood need for acceptance and approval all comes from like trying to fit in wherever I'm going. But that's actually, now I recognize it as a kind of a discovered gift, because it allows me as a filmmaker that in my job I can go into Mount Eden Prison and interview murderers or the Mongrel Mob or whatever, or an old age home or whatever, and I can adapt and acclimatise to whoever I'm with.
And you've done those sorts of things. You've had moments where you've had to do stuff in prison.
Oh yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's all happened. So, and I'm saying it kind of not trying to show off. But
No, you're not. You're making a good point.
Yeah, it's my appreciation and love for the diversity of the job. Like, instead of having an office job, which I now can't imagine, but it would be fine if I started doing that. Now that I've had a career of every day is different, every location, it's like I step into so many different worlds.
And also, not like you say, like that, not a chameleon, because that sounds a bit like you're sketchy, like a con man, but that ability to, ingratiate or fit yourself into any scenario and any kind of bunch of people,
exactly,
and get on with it.
Yeah, I have weeks like that where it's like I'm going from Parliament to prison or whatever, or just juvenile gangs or whatever, and it's like, wow, my life is really, I'm so lucky.
A number of people throughout history have gone from Parliament to prison. So I reckon if it was straight after Onslow, you must have got there like late teens, and coming to point and a half maybe before, you were there 7 years, right? That's a long time. That's amazing. So I don't know what to say other than discuss. 7 years. Wow.
Yeah, no, well, my intention was go for 4 years, get my degree, go back to Wellington or come back to New Zealand and become a filmmaker from New York Film School. And it was all very simple. But I finished and I guess both to my credit and luck, but the last year you make a thesis film. So my thesis film kind of won all the awards at the school film awards that time.
Amazing.
So I kind of got best director and best film, and then suddenly it felt like everything was being handed to me on a silver platter. Like part of winning that meant that I got representation from an agent.
It sounds like you worked really hard to get there.
I did, and that's why it does feel earned. But it was, but I did all that, and it was kind of like this total high of like, oh my god, I'm a director, da da da. But I mean, all of that hype and excitement and elevation lasted a couple of months, and then I still had to pay rent and get a job, and then suddenly I was waitering and telling everybody I was a filmmaker, which is a New York cliche.
In LA, actors. New York, yeah.
Totally. Want to read my screenplay?
Yeah.
So then I basically bounced back to the bottom and then had to go and door knock and try and hustle and learn how to prove to people I was a director.
But it was all in New York, during a great era. So I guess, obviously there would have been days of like, what am I doing? But overall, stuck it out for 7 years.
Yeah.
Came on back, I'm just guessing, you must have come on back pretty much mid-20s, right?
Yeah, I think I was 28, because I basically did 7 years in New York, and I had an American girlfriend at the time, and she got into USC, so we drove cross-country. I did a year in LA, and just kind of disliked LA. It was like 5 times bigger, and the characteristics.
It seems to really polarize people, LA. Like, in terms of what I'm meaning is, there's obviously will be people with a mid-ground opinion, right?
Yeah.
But people either really take to it or they really don't, eh?
Yeah. Well, at that time I didn't, and I think what I found, I've been to LA a lot since, and I'd even, if it was, post-pandemic and I didn't have 3 kids I was responsible for, I'd probably be living in LA giving it a good crack. But what I found, and the difference I saw, was if I did it in the other order, like LA moved to New York, it would have been fine. But coming from New York, basically, the beauty of New Yorkers is they walk the walk and they talk the talk. Like, they do what they say.
Yeah.
And then the big character difference in LA is they'll say everything you want to hear, and they won't do, none of it is like walking.
So you're like doing this kind of mental negotiation all the time of what's this person really about?
You'd be at parties and they're like, so are you in the industry? And it's just like, it's such wank. And if I ever, I played around sometimes, I'm like, oh, actually I'm a plumber. And they'd be like, oh, there's my friend. And they'd walk across the room. And it's like, you honestly, if you can't do something for them, they're not interested in talking to you. And that
lots of standing around at 4 a.m. with a runny nose making plans that will never happen.
Yeah. And it just became a year, even though I was there with my girlfriend at the time, it was like, it was a year of kind of dishonesty. Like, I'd go and door knock at companies and they go, oh, we love your show reel. We've got a music video next month. We'll get you to make it. And I'd get all excited.
God,
this is my break. And then it would never happen.
Sounds really toxic, man.
And similarly with the people there, they're like, hey, let's hang out on the weekend and I'll call you. And then they don't. And it's just like, wow, there's just no honesty in LA. And I know this is a generalization, but that was the contrast to what I had experienced in New York. And what's interesting is even after a year of being in LA, I found that my closest friends friends, funnily enough, were all not from LA. Like
Yeah.
they were from Chicago or New Orleans or whatever.
But I'd
elsewhere.
imagine, I wouldn't know that. I could look on the internet and find this out quickly, but I'd imagine a lot of LA isn't LA natives, like that's one of those places. It's
Yeah.
like, I can't think of the expression, but people make, that's the word, people make the pilgrimage there, don't they?
That's right. And New York's the same. But yeah, LA is very much, it's just kind of industry bias, really.
And then you come back and you somehow make the acquaintance of BK, and I'm assuming with Flying Fish.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
And he's
that's
employed
right.
a lot of people over the years, right?
Yeah.
And we'll get to the music videos in a second, but I'm guessing that's work making TVCs and stuff like that.
Yeah. I basically moved back to Wellington and confessing a little bit of a fear, like, oh my God, I've lived in New York and LA. Like,
Yeah.
how will I survive Wellington? I'm not going to like this tiny little city. And it was
You
like...
moved there at a good time, though. You moved there at a good time.
Oh, it was an amazing time,
Yeah.
but also it was the opposite of what I expected, which was that what I had missed in those anonymous metropolises was the village mentality of Welly, Cuba Street, where it's like, hey, what are you up to? Oh, I'm doing this thing. Oh, do you want a hand? Yeah, sure. Can you help me with my project? And that
Yeah.
whole supportive vibe that didn't exist overseas.
I've heard it referred to after I left there as the bro job, which is, I think, it's a good explanation of it. Yeah,
that makes
bro
sense.
job.
Yeah, but yeah. So in a nutshell, I started making like corporate videos. I got a job at a company called 2D Films, and the link to Flying Fish was I basically made my first funded music video was Trinity Roots Little Things, and I made that video, and then Flying Fish literally tapped me on the shoulder and said, "Do you want to come and get signed with us, and we'll get you lots of work?" And so
I was thinking about that video today. It's quite an iconic New Zealand music video, I reckon. I mean, you must have been happy with that, right? The way it
Yeah.
turned out.
Yeah, it was.
It still endures. It's like a good record that you put on 10, 15 years later,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
I think it still looks really great.
Yeah, thank you. And
Yeah.
we kind of, I chose to make it black and white to make it timeless, but
Yeah.
but also credit to the bros because the song is timeless. Like you couldn't go, that was made in 2000.
Yeah, yeah.
It's timeless. And really, it was one of the most satisfying collaborative things where usually I get a song from an artist, often hip-hop songs like, oh, what's your idea for the video? And I'll listen to the song, come up with the concept. But with Trinity, I literally had dinner with those guys and we all talked about it and bounced it around. And it was Ricky Gooch that went, oh, I kind of have an image in my mind of
Great.
an old woman crying. And I was like, oh, what if we had an old man crying? Like, that would be even more emotive. And then
Yeah,
Warren's
yeah.
like, Wee Cookie Carr lives in Newtown. Why don't you give him a call? And I'm like, okay. And so I cold called Wee Cookie Carr and pitched him the idea on the phone. He's like, all right, boy, meet me at the pub and buy me a beer. Seriously, it was that simple. And I'm meeting this, like, the godfather of Māori acting at
Yeah.
a pub in Newtown with a Discman, putting headphones on his head. He listens to the song, closes his eyes, and he's like, okay, that's us. It's that simple. It's just beautiful.
Wow. I was thinking about process, like whether it's collaborative with things like music videos, and you've just kind of spoken to that. But one thing I want to talk about before that is, and like I don't want this to be taken the wrong way. This is what I've been told about making music videos.
Yeah.
For a lot of directors, it's a way for them to kind of get their work out there and get known
Yeah.
for their creative chops and stuff, right? Do you think that's fair? A kind of fair?
Absolutely,
statement?
yeah. The classic thing is, you cut your teeth on music videos and then you
Yeah.
don't have to do them anymore. And even after I achieved a lot of people are like, why are you still making music
That's
videos?
what I was getting to. Is
No,
you kept doing them because you really enjoy making them, right?
Yeah.
And you're right into music. So,
I love them. Yeah, it is. It is a marriage of music and visual poetry, is the way I see it. But I still make them every now and then because I do. I love the process. I just wish I could make a living off it, but you can't. Do
That's
that,
right. And there's people known for like embracing them long term. Like Spike Jones is a bit big. Is it Spike Jones?
Yes, yeah. He's one of my heroes.
Yeah, yeah. And so you still make some, because I was thinking about that today. Like, this is where I'm just clearly like an older generation now, because
Me too.
all the music videos, right? Yeah, totally. You're 50, mate. I'm 45. Don't forget it. But
Show some respect.
Yeah, right. So, but I'm guessing that music videos, well, all their views are on YouTube now, right? They're not anywhere else. That's what
Yeah.
you're trying to make. So has that changed how people approach making music videos? Like, has the craft changed because you're not? So can you sort of like paraphrase what's different now about making one for YouTube?
I'm probably a bit like the Mohicans. I'm probably the last of the dinosaurs where we used to get budgets and shoot on 35mm film, and shooting on film meant that you needed a big lighting truck to expose that celluloid, and so budgets were bigger, and also the crews were bigger and the needs were bigger, and that was that process. And then I saw, really, as I was kind of starting to make feature films and making less music videos, but that was like the cusp of what I call the digital revolution, and it happened in music like it happened in film.
And also, side note, people stopped spending money on music, so there were budgets back then because people were buying units.
Like literally both industries, I felt, had a massive shift, and you either had to adapt or die and whatever else. And I remember thinking like, oh, okay, should I buy like the flashest new digital camera and I'll learn to be a producer, director, editor, cinematographer, gaffer, colorist, like do all those roles in one. And nowadays they call those young film school students or graduates predators or shredditors, because they're like a shooter, director, editor, or what it is. Little nicknames for it. And that's really what it is now. Like a young guy nowadays, Connor Pritchard's making a whole bunch of great local hip-hop videos for Switted and Mellowdowns and different artists. And he's just like a
one-man army.
He's a one-man band that when he's got the budget, he brings in other DOPs and everything. But he generally produces, directs, edits, does it all himself. And that's the school that he's come through. And that's really what we're also, well, I say we, like my generation is competing with in advertising, is... You know, there's young guys pitching for the job for way less, and then often you'll lose the job to somebody like that, and then the client will come back and be like, oh, but we really had problems with it. Can you fix it? It's like, well, you get what you pay for. And
that's right.
Sometimes you're buying experience and storytelling.
Well, also, I think, like, that skill level's amazing, and I'm seeing it more and more with my students coming through, like what a student can do with any digital software, be it audio or moving image, you know, every year, what they can accomplish and how much you can teach them in a period of time gets smaller and smaller and smaller. But to what you're speaking of, so the skill levels there, I get it, but I think what's missed a lot with that all-in-one kind of solution, I guess, is people maybe not using proper microphones or using, like... I think there's something about a dedicated department for each discipline, right? Where people are using the best gear and, you know. But then again, audiences are increasingly expecting less and less fidelity, aren't they? We've all got used to Zoom call podcasts, so... And our attention span's changing, you know, just with the evolution or revolution of smartphones. It's like, you know, scrolling through a feed or I'm bored of that song. Next song, it's like, who listens to... albums. I tried watching The Godfather again recently, and I just couldn't.
Slow.
My attention span's changed.
Yeah,
you couldn't get a kid to watch The Godfather these days.
Yeah, definitely. And I think it's probably a difference in cinematic language. This may happen in the music industry as well, but it's just movies were slower then. Like I've been taking my kids who are teenagers to like the Hollywood Cinema up here in Auckland to see like Footloose or Karate Kid or E.T. I took my son to
forcing your childhood on them. No, just kidding.
And they love a lot of the 80s movies, but they always go like, God, it was good, Dad, but it was so slow.
Totally. And people are making pop. You know all of this. People are making pop music now to capture. You got to get everything into the first few bars because of the shuffle button. If all of this fascinates me, how all of these factors lead to like, you know, changes in cultural output.
Absolutely.
But the last thing on the YouTube, you answered that well, but I was also meaning, like stylistically has the way music videos, you know, the way they look and feel, has that changed a lot with YouTube, or is it still the same basic principles?
I think there's always a kind of an evolution of kind of collective taste, you know, you look at any era and it's like the 90s are all Dutch angles and different things, and I look at music videos today and I feel like I could describe all the characteristics of what the look of videos are today, and I won't get into it, but it's like, so I think that movement happens, but at the same time, I think, I mean, even put it this way, even speaking of the short attention span thing and the YouTube kind of side of it, even projects like the RNZ series that I did about the history of hip hop songs. I'm doing a documentary series now called Tribal for Stuff Digital, and something that we're conscious of is because essentially it's like snackable size durations of media. Because so many people are either scrolling through a feed on their phone or tablet or TV, that you really want to try and grab their attention and prove to them that they want to watch this in the first 20 seconds. So what I've been doing, even with the hip-hop
like
series,
the music
was like,
thing I was talking about.
Okay, what's a really cool, innovative, haven't been seen yet credit sequence I can put at the beginning, so if people are only going to give it 20 seconds of chance, they go, oh shit, that was cool, and then they want to see more, and then you put the best quotes up front, so you almost front pack it to grab them, and then end the episode with a cliffhanger so that they're keen to click the next button.
Which has been storytelling 101 forever, like commercial breaks and so on, right?
Totally.
I get it.
But not with 2-hour slow movies from the 80s.
Just made me realise I'm somewhere in the middle. I'm somewhere in the middle because, like, I will turn snackable content if it grabs me into a meal, not quite The Godfather. So, for example, when the first season of Hip Hop Stand Up dropped, I just watched them all in a row. Because,
great.
Because why wouldn't you?
Yeah, awesome.
Know? So you kind of, yeah.
But at the same time, it gives the power to the audience to watch them in any order. So it's like, oh, there's 7 episodes.
Yeah.
That's my favourite song. I'm going to start on number 4, jump back to 1, go to 6.
I didn't even think about that. So when you put those out, you wouldn't really think about episode order or like an album track listing or like a TV series, right? Like, did you think about what order that you put each tune in?
Well, we presented it chronologically, starting with Upper Heart Posse Air 2 in 88, and we went all the way up to Church and AP. So we definitely had an arc of time, and we had old school talking about the new school kids and the new school kids talking about the old school music. So we had all of that kind of, generational kind of commentary.
Yeah.
But we still had. So if you watch it in the order like you did, then you're on a timeline journey.
Oh, yeah.
But if you want to just jump to your favourite songs, do what you want.
Yeah. No, that's right. And now it's coming back to me. I don't know if you've seen deduced via social media that I've started playing pinball competitively, with a bunch of middle-aged guys. Where did you shoot all those pinballs behind the people?
Oh yeah, that was actually
that's in Wellington.
That was in
Boneface Brewery, maybe.
Well done,
God,
you nailed it. I was trying to remember the name of the brewery, but it's the Super Brewery kind of out in I think Apuni or the Hut.
It's my mate Simon's Machines there.
Right. That's
last thing on the music videos. I had a couple more questions, but we'll move on. How was it writing along with Savage's fame in the US, because you went back and filmed videos with him, right? He was a thing over there, eh?
Oh yeah, amazing. And again, I mean, that's more of a Dawn Raid story, but the fact that Swing, which was possibly one of my, like the one that got away, where I got asked to do a video for it. They're like, okay, well, Chris, we want to do a booty shaking video in a laundromat, and I'm like, oh guys,
I'm guessing this is before it was on the Knocked Up soundtrack.
Exactly. So the very first video, and when they made Swing, and I was like, oh my God, this beat is stonking. Like, this is an anthem. And I loved the song straight away.
Yeah.
But when they said they wanted to make a twerking booting video, that's just me. I was just like, nah, not into the objectifying stuff. Like,
I get it.
So I turned it down, and then, of course, it went off to Knocked Up, and that went huge. But to your point, I have seen Savage's trajectory, and it's been a joy to watch.
Yeah, no, because I thought you went over and did some video work with him over there, didn't you? Well,
he was, I mean, really with Decepticons and Dawn Raid, he was doing his own thing, and it was actually, I still think that his springboard was Not Many. I feel like he found his voice when he comes on Not Many, the remix, and he goes, South Okalunga.
Yeah, that's right.
Good. And he bookends the video. He starts with it, and then at the very end, he's like, oh shit, and he walks out of frame, and that was the end. But he was pumping gas at the BP on Dominion Road when I was editing the video, and I lived in Balmoral, so I'd drive down and I'd see Demetrius, as he's known to his family, see Demi like pumping gas, and I'd pull in, I'm like, hey, Uso, like, the video's amazing, you're going to be a star. He's like, really, do you think so? And I'm like, bro, this is going to change things for you. And I'm not saying it's credit to the video,
the Scribe video,
but it's one of many, and he then went off, stop, drop and roll, but it's almost like he found his growl. It's like Busta Rhymes as the Dungeon Dragon. Like, he found his signature sound in that song.
There's another US rapper on the tip of my tongue who he totally reminds me of with his style, but we won't pause the podcast. I'm trying to think who else. I was starting to think about it to say to you. I can't remember. But I think that Swing on the Knocked Up soundtrack was probably the first example in New Zealand of that kind of licensing working for a local artist. I think it's sort of set. When people sort of change pivot their way of doing things, based on a success like that.
And I think from my memory of the Dawn Raid documentary, which is totally worth seeing, I think Andy and Danny, who ran Dawn Raid, were actually in financial crisis before they went bankrupt, and I think it might have been Andy's idea, if I'm remembering this right, and he basically offered the entire Dawn Raid catalogue as soundtrack for fairly affordable rates to America, or they got in with some licensing company for movie soundtracks, and they just went, here's the whole catalogue, and then that's how Knocked Up happened, and then after that there was more and more.
So do you reckon he maybe not quite fuck you money, but do you reckon like overnight, I mean, I don't know how old everyone is listening, but I think they're all around our age, but my point is, you will remember a time in the history of the music industry where I think it was $1 a tune on iTunes, and that's when that tune hit, right? So it was pre-streaming,
right?
So I'm just saying, like, do you reckon he became seriously wealthy kind of overnight off that tune?
Yeah, I guess it's questionable in terms of what percentage he got and how if it saved Dawn Raid at the time and how much Savage saw. Like, I know Savage left like Dawn Raid and he was unhappy, and he's kind of even like I was at Chris Chetland's place a couple of weeks ago, and he played me some new Decepticons tracks that he's mixing, and I'm like, oh, this is amazing, and I'm like, is this through Dawn Raid? He's like, no, this is Savage is driving this. He's doing this with the boys. So they're doing their. I don't know if that might be a bit discreet. Now I've shared it on the podcast.
That's right.
Anyways, you didn't hear it from me.
That's right. We'll see how much reach this thing's got. I don't think it's got as much as Swing by Savage. But so Dawn Raid filmmaking. Obviously, Oscar completely capable on his own, but I'm interested. Like, I don't think he'd made a feature film beforehand. Did did he come to you for any advice or help with that incredible film?
Oscar?
Yeah.
No, he didn't. No, I mean, I've known him a long time because we did Sione's Wedding together and stuff, and we were kind of social friends.
Had he made a feature before that? I don't think he'd made a feature before that, had he?
He had, no.
It seems a huge undertaking if you haven't done it before. That's why I ask. Yeah. That's why I ask.
Yeah, exactly. No, he didn't. No, he didn't come to me, but I mean, I interviewed him recently for the Scribe doco, and actually, when I saw Dawn Raid, I went to the premiere in Monaco, and I messaged him that night because I didn't get to see him, and just said, hey, beautiful job, you did a great job, blah blah blah, so we're always connecting over that, but no, it didn't come to me. Didn't need my advice. He did a great job.
That's what I mean. That's why I started with that. I'm not meaning it. Yeah, you get what I'm saying. I was meaning it from the point of view of, like, to me, I just think I think making a feature-length film, I don't know, I just romanticize it. It seems a huge undertaking.
Yeah, it's like writing
a novel. And also to pull off your first one and for it to be that good. I went and saw it down at, it made me realise I actually need to go to the cinema more, because I'm really glad I went down and saw it pre-lockdown hitting down the road here at whatever that rundown
Queen Street
megalopolis place is.
The IMAX.
Yeah, that hasn't had any work done on it in about 15 years.
Yeah.
So was, and this is like probably when I had Moo on and I talked about boats, and he just went, oh my God, that's a million years ago. But we've got to talk about Sione's Wedding. Was that your first feature film?
Yeah, that was my first.
Yeah. And again, talk about that. I mean, it kind of like, what's that expression for when you break out to the broader public? It was your what do we call it? It's your breakout moment. That's your breakout moment. That's the word. Yeah. So how did that come about? Were you pitched a script, or how did you become involved?
Yeah. No, I again very lucky, but also felt kind of earned. But basically, I was like busy making music videos. I think I was just finishing a Day Hummo music video for We Got Right, and I got a call, and it's like, "Hello, Chris, it's John Barnett here from South Pacific Pictures," and he's like one of the godfathers of the industry. And
Right.
Oh, hi, John. How are you?
Yeah.
Oh, good, thank you. We've got a project we want to talk to you about. We think you're perfect for it, and will you please come into the studio? And and I was just like heart racing and didn't even know what it was. And I went in there and had a meeting with him and Oscar Kitely, because he was a co-writer with James Griffin, and then Simon Burnett. So there was a bunch of people involved, and basically they slid the script across the table to me and said, so it's about these 4 Samoan guys in Grey Lynn, and they essentially pitched the outline and slid across the table and said, have a read of it, we think you're perfect. And I kind of went, thank you, I feel honoured. Are you sure you don't want a Samoan director? Which was my
fair question.
No, it's universal, and you've got a good understanding and affinity with the culture, and and they really essentially expressed that through my short films and my music videos, which of course some of them I shot in Samoa, like for the Feel Style and Savage and other people.
Probably Caps as well.
No, I didn't do any.
Anyway, sorry, going off track. You keep going.
It's fine. I have done a Kapisi video that I loved, but it wasn't in Samoa.
Yeah.
Anyways, but they essentially said, no, it's a universal thing. It's about 4 guys. It's less about the culture. It's about this. And they did, to Oscar's credit, he brought Rev Mua on board as a cultural consultant to help me as a Palangi, and it was just an incredible experience. And we just made the best film we could. And I say this with respect to Oscar and James, but I do think the film is funnier than the screenplay. Like when I read the screenplay, I was like chuckling through it.
So you're saying, you kind of saying, is that, if I rephrase that, you're saying the performances really brought out the best in the script?
Just everything, the synergy. And I'm not saying, it's because I was a director, because it was my first film. I was nervous as hell, but I remember being almost like frozen by my nerves of like, how am I going to make this funny? What is funny? How do I know what's funny? And like just being frozen, because all of my mentors were like, you do know comedy is the hardest thing to do.
That's a really great thing to say to you leading up.
Totally, and it put fear in me. And this is all before Taika, so there was very little New Zealand comedies at the time. There was like Scarface was kind of a dark comedy, and you go way back to Came a Hot Friday, but there was hardly
Goodbye Pork Pie, not much.
but not many actual comedies. And so, anyways, and then
there was Send Gorilla in the 80s, bro.
That's right. How could I not think of that?
Yeah.
And then I just had that moment where I went, shit, all I've got is my sense of humour.
Yeah.
Like, I can't pretend to think something's funnier than I don't think it is. I can only trust my instinct. But I guess getting back to it, that synergy was the Naked Samoans were a comedy troupe who have been, they were established, they've been together for 10 years, they were best mates, they grew up together, and I just trusted their vibe, what I thought was funny, the vibe on set, the crew, everybody was laughing when the cameras weren't rolling, and it was just a feel-good vibe that I think embedded itself into the film.
I thought about that with casting and your involvement. Like, I mean, for people who don't know, I remember talking to Oscar on my breakfast show on Active, like mid-late 90s, when he was part of the Naked Samoans. So that collective had been going a long time. So you've kind of got that ensemble. That's the term, right? The ensemble cast kind of built in.
Yeah.
But what I did want to ask, though,
here's just a quick tiny quick fun fact. You just made me think of it. The terms of them being ensemble. So they were like theatre, like kind of comedy troupe. They went to Edinburgh, but in Brotown, how the characters are always like pew 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 pew.
Yeah.
And then I heard later that it was literally Chappelle walking through the streets of Edinburgh, and he's like, "Look at all these beautiful ladies. I'm going to impregnate them with my super sperm." Pew 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 pew. And that was that gag. Yeah. So that never really gets explained in Brotown, but it's just those little backstories that I love.
Because I was in Aussie at the time I watched it. I was there 6-7 years, so I was kind of apart from what was going on in New Zealand. But I remember watching the film vividly. Hadn't really revisited. I don't think I'd actually ever looked at the cast spelt out, i.e. on the Wikipedia page for the film.
Yeah. And
it's a pretty amazing lineup of New Zealand talent, many of whom endure. So aside from that, built-in ensemble or kind of comedy collective, were you involved with the wider casting?
Because
you got like Madeline Sami, you've got a number of people there, right?
Yeah, I do. The answer is no and yes. So the wider casting I was, but basically the core casting they had premeditated. So because it was a Naked Samoans, they had gone, okay, here are the four characters, like this is what they're known for. Robbie is the handsome party guy, unfaithful party guy, and Oscar's the nerdy kind of like guy trying to get the girl. So basically the four guys, David Fane obviously is Bolo, Tawila was always going to be her role as Lani, and then Madeline Sami was attached, and so I think it was the 6 or the 7 of them who are all part of the core, really, and then the rest, all the other characters, I basically cast and chose. But
so, is it one of those kind of life-changing things being involved with that film?
Oh yeah, God yeah. Not that I mean, I knew at the time. I definitely, like, with all of my nerves and everything, I did feel ready to make a feature. Like I didn't see it coming, and that phone call was out of the blue, and I'm like, what now?
It's probably the best way for it to happen.
But
right?
in many ways, when I look back at like, I can't make a living off music videos, because I was really putting so much energy, especially conceptually, into making the music videos that I made quite memorable and stand out and high production value. Like, we wanted the Day Hummo video to look like an American hip-hop video, but almost tongue-in-cheek. But it was doing all these things, and then I was also putting my name on the front, like, a video by Chris Graham. And so essentially all of that promotion did lead to exposure, which led to them calling me for the film. But I was just lucky because it was greenlit, funded. They've been trying to make that movie for 4 years, and it was
really?
Yeah, it was actually. I think the Film Commission were nervous that non-Samoans might not find it funny, because remember, it's only a script at that stage.
Yeah.
But I think Brotown, to the credit of the guys, Brotown kicked the door open.
Oh, it was Brotown first.
Brotown was only a year before, but
right.
the ratings of Brotown proved that it was universally funny, and that you didn't have to be Samoan to get it, which is quite an ignorant concern in the first place. But that's how it rolled. So by the time they came to me, it was greenlit, ready. Do you want to do this summer? And I was just like, oh my God, is this all being handed to me on a silver platter? And I just embraced it and went with it.
It's a very kind of broad question, but what did you learn from it, from doing your first feature?
Oh God, I think you learn everything. There's so much. You learn restraint. You learn about your ego. You learn about collaborating. You learn about letting go. Trust the process is probably the biggest one. And half the time, even though I directed a lot of music videos and commercials, when you do your first film, actually one of the other big things I think I learned about was how to see the jigsaw, because you get the script and you read it, you're like, oh, that's a great story, here's the arc, and then you shoot it totally out of order.
Yeah,
so I remember
I
think my first or second day, I remember 6 a.m, still very nervous about being on set and getting to know the crew who I hardly knew. And I think Chappelle or something came up to me. He's like, okay, Chris, where's my character at? Like, what have I been through? And what have I... And,
I don't know.
I had to go, holy shit, page 76. Okay, sure, you've gone... So Lani just had an argument with you and you're really upset. So you're hurt because of that, but you've got to really ask for forgiveness. And so you always had to check where is the character at that stage of this film that you're shooting out of order. And then you get to the edit and you put it back in order and you really hope it flows,
Yeah.
And it did. And it was just we didn't know... We knew we were making something special, but we had no idea it was going to be a hit, and it was just a breakout hit. And I actually do think that the piracy leak, like the legendary piracy of
I didn't know it was
Sionis-
leaked.
Oh yeah
Early Pirate Bay days or something.
No, it was literally a DVD. Like they know who the guy was that did it. He stole it. He worked at the post-production house where we made the film, and he stole a DVD copy to show. He was so excited about it, he wanted to show his mate,
and his mate
and his mate said, "Can I borrow it?" And then it just spread like wildfire, like DVDs through South Auckland, and South Pacific Pictures and John Barnett have said, like, I think we've probably calculated $1 to $1.5 million loss at what happened. But I personally think it was street marketing unconsciously, and that everybody's seeing it, especially the Polynesian community.
That's a great way to look at it. That makes sense.
I think it was a blessing in disguise.
It was $1.5 million marketing campaign, and which people do
exactly because everybody that saw it was so, especially people in the Polynesian community, was so excited to celebrate it that when it came out in the movie theatre, they'd take their family. Or I talked to people that saw it like 5 times in the theatre, even though they had the DVD, and the DVD had uncontracted music on it, and it was like an offline and, temp music and different things. Like, I didn't even have a copy of that.
Come and pay and see the proper version after you've seen the kind of like bootleg.
But it was just this breakout hit, and it was an amazing time for me, and it was a real launch pad for my career. I was very, very fortunate. Yeah.
And then the year, I don't know how you managed to make another film the year following. Like, how did you get The Ferryman out in a year?
In a very similar way.
Which seems quite different stylistically and everything to everything else you've done. Really curious.
Even I was confused, but I remember I was eating...
I was confused.
No, I was, because I remember I was eating lunch in an Indian restaurant. I was just like in a lunch break for something. I was by myself, and I got a phone call, and it was one of the people at the Film Commission, and they were like, hey, we've got this like psychological horror movie called The Ferryman, and we think you'd be perfect for it. And I'm like, because I made a romantic comedy? Like, it was just a joke. Yeah. And they were like, no, because of your...
very New Zealand, like, I get it.
Yeah. And they were like, no, because you made a short film called Water. And prior to that, I had made a short film in Wellington, a Film Commission-funded short called Water, which is kind of essentially an analogy about global warming. And it was very much in a suspenseful, psychological thriller style. It wasn't a horror, but it was like a 10-minute thriller, suspenseful short. And that went to Sundance and did really well as a short film. And they were like, no, that's why we think you'd do this horror. And again, it felt like a real gift, because I had aspired a bit like Kubrick, not putting myself alongside him, but to try and build my career around doing a very diverse range of genres and wanting the challenge of going, I want to do a children's movie. Yes, I want to tell a love story. Yes, I want to make a horror. Yes, I want to do an action film. Like, I would, if I could pick and choose, I would love to do them all.
So do you think it was, you just got me thinking about this now, do you think it was a good move doing, because I was thinking like when an agent gives an actor advice on what they kind of should or shouldn't do.
Yeah.
Do you think it was maybe a confusing move when your breakout film had been this and then that other film? No, I was going to say, but then again, that's me being nerdy and in-house about it. Maybe the public don't even think about that sort of thing.
No, but it's a good question in terms of career choice, because of course I've reflected on it a lot, and I think, like, they asked me to do that while I was editing Sioni's Wedding. So Sioni's wasn't a success yet. So as far as I went, I kind of went, well, wow, I can make two
Just
feature
sow
films.
your seed everywhere and see what
Yeah,
happens.
like 2 feature films back to back.
Yeah,
Like that
great.
doesn't happen in
No,
New
no,
Zealand.
that
Like I
doesn't
was
happen in New
so
Zealand.
lucky.
Yeah.
But then, in retrospect, and not to beat myself up, but The Ferryman did not do as well as Sione's did. Like it did quite well overseas, but not locally, and that's
Yeah.
another whole story. But in a nutshell, when I look back and go, if that film hadn't come up and Sione's was a hit film, the Film Commission would have probably come to me and said, well done, what do you want to make next? Which is probably what happened to Taika. And then I'd go, I've got the script ready, and I would have made my next thing. But instead, I didn't have a script ready, so I went off and made The Ferryman, and it did well overseas, but didn't really make a splash in New
It's
Zealand.
extraordinary that you had that output, that level of output in that period of time. And, it was a success either way, right? So
Oh, definitely, and huge learnings, and like great, early New Zealand. I say early old school rock soundtrack. It was all Dragon and the Sail, Peking Man, and just like early soundtrack.
where can
as
I
well.
find it? Again, I was away. I came back. I came back that year, so I got to tell you, I didn't even know about that film till
No.
today because I wasn't here.
Most people don't know about it,
Yeah,
honestly.
yeah.
Like it's regarded in horror circles overseas and horror fans and sites, but not.
But is it
known
licensed
locally.
anywhere? Can we watch it anywhere?
It's on DVD. You'd
Yeah.
have to track it down. Yeah,
I'd have
God,
to track,
you might.
Chris, I'd have to track down a DVD player.
No, I can't believe I just said DVD. It's like, what a backtrack.
Yeah.
It might be on iTunes or something. I haven't looked for a while because, don't know.
So,
I should know.
to totally preaching to the choir here, but I'm kind of more telling the audience this, probably preaching to many of them as the choir as well. There's been a lot. There's been a big year or so for content, to use that modern parlance, about New Zealand hip-hop and its history, right? There's been Phil Bell and Severe and Martin Pepperell's podcast,
fantastic.
which to use another word, which I binged recently.
Yeah, it's great.
There's a part 2 coming. There's part 2 of the series. There's the Dawn Raid doco we talked about, and then the other 2 you're involved with, which is the New Zealand Hip Hop Stand Up series about each individual tune per episode.
Yeah.
And then the Scribe doco, which we'll chat about to close on off. So the New Zealand Hip Hop Stand Up, fantastic, man. I loved every single one of them. I know Thomas, who was involved in the editing.
Oh, yeah, Tom's great.
So, 'cause I work with him, so I got to chat.
Oh, yeah.
I got to ask him.
Do you teach with him?
Yeah.
Teach alongside him?
very much so. We're both in radio, audio, media, at the same school.
He's a great editor, and he's a good
He's
man.
one of those guys that's just good at everything.
Yeah.
He happens to also be a rock star. You know that, eh?
Nobody, I know, but a lot of people don't. But it's like, rock
So
star on the weekend.
it's funny when some of our students realise that their teacher is the guitarist in Villainy, and it's one of their favourite bands. But anyway, so I got a bit of insight, and I really liked. Aside from obviously, I'm interested in the subject matter, and I was kind of around in the early days in some ways. I really liked it stylistically, like the way that you presented both series. They're quite different stylistically, right? Hey, the second series is you kind of got different approach with camera work and stuff. Is that right?
Yeah, a little bit actually. And the second series, I directed 2 of the stories, like 2 of the doco portraits.
Oh, sorry, that's worth important point out. That's right. It's a range of directors. It's not just you.
No, there was one other, but basically they kind of went. I ended up being creative director overseeing it because I was so deep in the Scribe documentary for the past year that the producer, and he was producing both the Scribe doco and the hip hop series, Nigel McCulloch from the Down Low. He was like, "Listen, bro, you just can't do both." And I was like, "Oh, I'm sure I can." And it's like I didn't want to let go of my babies.
Control
but in the end,
freak.
I kind of went, "No, that's true. I can't actually fit it all in." So we brought Sophie Musgrove on board, who's a young director, and she directed 5 of the stories, and I did Damn Native, Behold My Cool Style, and OMC How Bizarre.
Man, it was so okay. So I was going to say, just side note, it was great seeing. Not that I know him, but certainly know of him because he's that KDRU is probably my favourite hip hop album ever from New Zealand. But it was great seeing Danny looking so healthy and clear headed.
Yeah, I know, amazing.
And it was completely different to the guy I remember kind of seeing from the periphery. Like I'm not claiming to know him, but I just thought, wow. What? Yeah.
No, he was great. He was so charismatic, and I mean, funny too.
Well, basically, he's cleaned up. I didn't realise. He basically said I had a drug and alcohol problem for years, and I've cleaned up. And far out, the difference on screen was a remarkable way.
Totally. Yeah, no, incredible. And we were chasing him for about a year and a half to actually get him. So we were interviewing people, and you can see some of the crossover interviews. Like, for example, Bennett, who's from Upper Hutt Posse. We interviewed him, like you said, by the pinball machines for Air 2. But then we were in that interview. we were intending to do Behold My Cool Style like 2 years ago.
Yeah.
So it's like, oh, Bennett, well, you were in Damn Native. Talk about that song,
Yeah.
the importance. And then he spoke on it, and we got everyone talking about it, and we got all the interviews we needed, except for Danny, who was just would not show up for meetings, would not respond to emails.
Sounds like he was
And-
right at the end of sort of like the Scribe story in a lot
Yeah.
of ways. He's
And-
just
and-
getting to the tail end of all that kind of fuckery and
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, yeah.
And I mean, DLT even joked. He's like, bro, if you want to interview him, you got to drive out to Muriwai with a crate of beer and a bag of weed and sit him down and you'll have a deal. And I was like, okay,
That's-
well, we can do that.
Who's that legendary New Zealand skater? The guy that's like totally off the grid, kind of missing a bunch of
Oh,
teeth.
Lee Ralph.
Those are the exact instructions I was given if I want Lee Ralph on the
Oh,
podcast.
right. Awesome. Yeah. Oh, he's a legend.
I think
Yeah.
it was drive to the coast,
Right.
crate of beer, Herb.
Yeah, and then you might have a deal. You might get lucky.
Yeah, yeah.
Like that's literally the talent release form is the green and the beer.
So, but the stylistic side of it, yeah. The second I asked Thomas about it, I forget what it was, but there was a particular camera technique where it sort of looks like
Oh,
the
yeah.
heads. What is that, mate?
Yeah.
What is that?
Oh, that was me doing a little bit of a signature, but also
No one can see what I'm doing, but
Yeah.
watch it and you'll see what I mean.
Yeah. When you say what is that, it's like what are you doing with your hands?
It
Are you-
looks like there's sort of a camera hanging on a wire off the person's head. That's
Yeah.
the only way I can describe it.
Sure. So it's a post-production technique, and it's called stabilizing.
Yeah.
And it was something that I kind of discovered. I kind of played with it. You were talking before about Capisi, and I did a Capisi and Shea Fu video called "You Can't Resist Us," and it was them on a farm. We used to joke about it, calling it foot trot raps.
Yeah.
If you want to look it up.
Yeah.
But I kind of discovered the technique, saw it in overseas videos, like very lightly played with, and I was like, shit, that's a cool effect. And then I did a little bit on that Capisi video that you can see when he's like being a farmer. And then when we did Not Many, I then went, okay, that worked well on the Capisi thing. I'm going to do that as the main technique of this whole video.
Yeah.
So if you look at Not Many, when Scribe's like moving his finger left and right, and they're all
Oh,
running
so you were
around.
doing it back even then?
Yeah, so that whole video was, and that was 20 years ago. So it was only when basically, I guess me thinking, okay, well, we're doing these documentary portraits, we've only got a certain budget, we can't follow them around for a day in their day-to-day life or recording in the studio, we're just doing sit-down interviews. How do I make talking heads visually compelling?
And so the aesthetic, it's coming back to me, sorry if I get this wrong, but it's basically the feeling, the aesthetic is that the person's kind of static and the background's doing all the movement, right?
Yeah, so in a
So
nutshell...
it's sort of a reverse of what we expect.
Exactly. So
Yeah,
the
yeah.
trick is that basically you put it in post-production, you put a tracking point on a part of either their neck or their head or their shoulders. If you put it on their head and they move their head around a lot, the effect will be more extreme. But you put it on their neck, and it's like if their body sways left
So
to right,
this
the
is-
frame moves left
this-
and right,
this
but
is-
they stay in the
right.
centre, basically.
So this is a modern software, computer-based luxury. Great.
Kind of, but
Yeah.
again, Not Many was 20 years ago, so it's not new. It's
No.
I just see it as part of hip hop visual aesthetic, and I thought this could work well if we do
Yeah.
it quite subtly. It'll hold visual attention for a whole lot of talking.
Oh, speaking of hip-hop video aesthetics, just reminded me of another music video director I was really into for years, Hype Williams' videos.
Oh, sure, yeah, he was my inspiration.
Missy and well, my inspiration to watch, your inspiration to produce and make. But yeah, people, if you don't know, Google Hype Williams, you'll know a whole lot of his videos. But yeah, for very much stuck out for the era.
Yeah,
and
he
a
did.
lot of iconic content, kind of late 90s, early 2000s.
Yeah,
right?
he was the man. In
He
New
made
York
Buster
in the
Rhymes
90s.
kind of like and Missy Elliott almost like cartoon characters.
Yeah, like fisheye lenses and inflated costumes and giant spherical locations.
Some of her
and-
costumes are wild in those Missy videos. man.
Crazy. But he did, a lot of Mace videos, Biggie. He did Flavor in Your Ear, which was like one of my favorite. In fact, Flavor in Your Ear was one of the inspirations of the Not
Here
Many
comes
video.
the brand new, that one, yeah.
Yeah.
Flavor in your ear.
Yeah.
Makes a brand new Craig Mack. No, Craig.
It was Craig Mack.
Craig Mack. Oh,
Yeah.
I'm good. So I had a bunch of nerdy we've done enough nerdy tech stuff for the hip hop stand up. But I want to ask this about it. There must have been some debate, whether it was internally or whether, I don't know whether you were co-choosing with other people, but there must have been a longer list and some songs that didn't make it.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
Was that quite tough towards the final?
It was, but also kind of hopeful wish list. So basically, Series 1, we kind of went, okay, we're going to get funding for 7 songs. Let's write a list. And I think we had a list of like 30 that we whittled down to like 15 or whatever. And then we kind of went, well, what's a good arc? And some of them had themes, like Air 2's clearly about, Māori perspective and so sovereignty and
and it's got to be in the series. Let's face it.
Oh, it was the first hip hop song. I mean, you hear that in the hip hop podcast. It's there.
Yeah.
So, so in a sense, it was. What are the songs? What's a good menu or recipe of songs that reflect a 30-year spectrum?
Yeah.
And that's why we kind of finished with like Church and AP. They were like the new kids on the block.
Love
at the
those
time.
guys.
Oh, amazing.
Yeah.
And then and it also just a great story how they were kind of still in high school while they were recording that song, and Mellow Downs was their mentor, and then it was like the most Shazam track off a BBC show in London, and it was just a great story behind it. So it really is the story behind the songs. But to answer your question, then what didn't fit into the first 7 episodes, we of course had the next season ready to go.
Right.
And we just crossed our fingers that when it went to air, it did the numbers and the viewing for Radio New Zealand, and of course it did. And luckily, a whole bunch of strangers and fans would put in the comments, whether it was Facebook or YouTube, like, what about Decepticons? What about Dehamo?
Right.
What about...
Yeah, and I think that's really healthy. So
So that meant season 2, and I'm now currently crossing fingers for season 3.
I was just going to say, so like the music producer who releases the album and they say, I've still got 30 other tracks I could have used, like you've basically got a list of tracks that you're thinking about for season 3 already.
And even I mean, here's a little inside thing, this is just me being a little bit greedy, but like Dehamo We Got Ride was on the list for season 2, but because I was doing the Scribe doco and I wasn't available to direct it, and similarly with Feel Style Suemele, which I did the video for in Samoa, I just kind of went, I really I want to do both those stories myself. And they're like, well, one of them's got to be in there. And I kind of had to pick. But basically the Dehamo story is in season 3 with kind of my name attached to it. So I'm looking forward to that.
It was great seeing how stoked, I always get Kaz and Kaz confused. Feel Style was about... Did you see him chatting on social media? He was so wrapped with that episode, mate.
Absolutely, yeah. And it's kind of bittersweet for me because I've known him so long. Like, we go back to Wellington days and
I remember those guys used to, it was like the older cool guys when I was like a young teenager. They'd sit in the in Manners Mall with a chessboard and like Kaz and Kaz. That's his mate's name, eh? Yeah.
So Kaz is short for Picasso because Feel Style Kaz used to be incredible at art. Apparently at St. Pat's College, he was great at art. Still is. And
Kaz was the main organising force with Foot Soldiers and all of that stuff.
Yeah, and he was one of the first rappers. So I don't know if you're 5 years younger, but if you've heard of Noise and Effect and the Mao, but they were the early band. And
they did an orientation tour, which I caught my first year at uni with a guitarist from Wellington called Jay playing as well. I remember them as a unit.
Right.
So yes.
And even Cosmo, like I was doing graffiti art as a teenager, and I nervously approached him in Manners Mall, and I'm like, "Are you Cos?" He's like, "Yeah, why?" And I'm like, "Oh, I'm a graffiti artist."
Are you a tagger, Chris?
I'm not a tagger, but I'm a muralist. But I do massive graffiti art. So my intro into hip hop as a teenager in the 80s was starting with breakdancing and then graffiti art, because I was visually drawn as a filmmaker. I just started doing murals, and then I was determined to be like the guy around. Do you remember?
And I found a photo of it recently, about a year ago. I put it up on social media. It stimulated a whole lot of people's memories. Do you remember how 2 people were writing smack and craze everywhere in New Zealand?
Oh,
in Wellington, SMAK.
Yeah.
I'd love to know who those 2 people are.
Yeah. Actually, I don't even know. What era was that? Because that's
That'd be 90s.
familiar. 90s. But yeah, in the 80s, it was like, DLT, as in Daryl Thompson from Up Art Posse and Damn Native. He was running around town writing Slick DLT. That was his graffiti name. And Coz's graffiti name was Frosty K.
And I think I got Otis's one in the episode I did with him, which was years ago. Opto, that's right.
Yeah, so Otis and I are kind of similar in the sense that...
So New Zealand Police, if you want to open up those old files, which started to get it...
heaps of confessions. I've even got photos to prove it.
Statute of limitations, plus probably most fences and so on have been replaced by now. So I thought, that, as I say, for the third time I've said it, I really enjoyed that series. It was great to see a second one made. Why do you think so much? Is it just the timing that's been, 20, however many years, probably longer, of New Zealand hip hop?
Yeah, 30.
Why is all this stuff kind of getting made around the same time? It's just a happenstance, or
I think it's interesting. It is all happening at the same time, and there's been a lot of talk in the community about that, and I think it is. probably inevitable, but the culture is 30 years old. So those of us that are now middle aged, like myself, 50, or people in their 40s, and some of the guys like Severe and some of the older guys are in their mid 50s or whatever.
Oh, and older.
And so I think for all of us, it's retrospective to go, God, that was such a special time, and it needs to be archived. The stories need to be told. It needs to be there for the next generation to draw on, and also appreciate the gatekeepers and the pioneers that started it all.
Well, like separate to your projects, I mean, kudos to Rover, who Martin Pepperell was telling me. I think they expected they were going to do something quite kind of commercial radio boxed in, like maybe the history of hip hop would be from about 2001 onwards, and the story Martin told me was that obviously Severe got him on board as someone to write it and structure it.
Research, yeah.
Martin said, yes, I can do that, and Martin said to me he probably didn't know whether he could do that. He just said he could do it. But anyway, the story he tells me is that, those two, and I mean, obviously he's almost got a knighthood, hasn't he? So he can, I'm sure he can find people, make things happen. But the point being is they made it a lot bigger project than it was originally envisaged to be. It's an unusual project for commercial radio to do something so in depth. So I'm looking forward to the second one. Now, to the Scribe documentary, does this feel like, I mean, the response to it feels like, it's important's a funny word, isn't it? But does this feel like a particularly weighty project for everything you've done? Like the response to it's been quite remarkable.
Yeah, no, it does. And though it's 8 short episodes, it totals 95 minutes. So really, it is. It's a feature length
film.
It's really kind of like in a sense, my third or fourth, which is kind of debatable, but my fourth feature film.
Yeah.
Third being directed all the dance sequences of Born to Dance about 7 years ago, which was like a hip-hop dance movie with Paris Goebel and all of those guys. But I just directed...
Voguing? Is that what it's called? No. Paris, sorry, anyway, keep going.
No, it's fine.
Yep.
No, it's not... are you thinking Paris is Burning?
Yes, I am. I'm about 20 years out. So to the Scribe film. So it's in about 95 minutes long.
So it's really my first feature documentary, and it was like such an honour to tell that story. Both in terms of Marlowe's courage, but also his whole family opening up, and for the privilege of them being so vulnerable and open with really incredibly traumatic kind of generational trauma.
And private, let's face it. We all know from all our own families and friends that, there's a lot of stuff going on, and a lot of, people have to be quite private with a lot of stuff, I think, for survival and protection and all of that. So I think it's really, I mean, it goes without saying, it's really brave.
Totally. And I think it's probably for each of them, I think it is consciously or unconsciously, but part of their healing. And I've gotten a lot of personal messages from some of his cousins and people that were involved.
That's great. But that's more than just a media project.
Oh, man. Yeah, and they're just like, but also some of it quite confronting. Like they're like, yes, beautiful documentary, but you've actually opened up like a box of trauma that I'd suffocated for a long time, and I've had to address it, and that's confronting, but it's also a bit of a gift, and I just want to say thank you. But I was crying throughout the whole doco, and I've got a lot of work I need to do on myself, and
so some of these people from his, you're pretty much saying his kind of inner circle, like, is it people that you've never had interactions with before? They're messaging you on Facebook and stuff.
Some from strangers,
because
yes.
that would be a lot.
There's the flip side, which is Marlo and I have gotten messages from strangers being like, I was going to give up on life and I saw this documentary and now I want to give it another chance. And that's credit to Marlo, not to me as a filmmaker. That's his story of triumph, inspiring people that are still in the darkness, But in terms of the personal messages, I think I'd like to think part, and a lot of people have described it as very intimate, but besides interviewing people and getting them talking directly to camera like they're talking to the audience, and of course they're very emotional interviews, so it's confronting for the audience to feel somebody looking at them, pouring their heart out and all of their past. But I think part of the intimacy did come from, because I've known Scribe for 20 years, I knew his brother really well. Some of his cousins I just knew from the scene, like Lady Six is a friend because I've known her for so long.
It's an amazing group of people that all came up together. Dallas, Lady, it's quite remarkable.
Dallas, Richie Mills, Anton, Carter from Christchurch days. Even Sarah, Specs One in Wellington, like I know her really well, but because she's a graffiti artist, and her husband Kerb and I and Sarah all used to do graffiti around Schaefer's Park together. And
I think I remember her from the 90s in Wellington. I'm pretty sure she used to go up to La Luna.
Yeah. No, they were all they were turntablists and they were DJ battling then, and Sarah and Curb and
some of these stuff. Sorry, we're getting very into the weeds specific. It's good. People find this interesting.
It's old welly history, but also to their credit, like some people in hip hop, or at least the old school thinking was, you do one element of hip hop and you do it really well.
You do it really well.
DJ, you're a graffiti artist or whatever, and those guys, which a lot of people see as kind of the royalty of hip hop, like Curb and Sarah and others, can actually do it all. Like they do graffiti well, they DJ well, they sometimes they rap or whatever, I thought breakdance and
right, yeah.
They do it all.
I thought there's a lot of thought in the film, but let's call it a film in the series of whatever you call it. And one thing that struck me is Peter P Money's like. It was interesting. It's like I could see why he's such a successful guy, because there was that kind of like pragmatism of like, bro, I need to kind of keep my career right, and but then at the same time there was obviously like care and love for his friends. So I found that quite powerful. I don't know if you kind of know what I mean there. It's like this guy goes like because what some people do is there's that whole, I don't know if it's codependency, but some people like keep people in the fold and it just works out worse for everyone. But he kind of really honestly says, look, I kind of had to shake him for a while, but there was always love there.
Absolutely.
So I found that really cool.
Really
that
powerful. And you wouldn't know that about them. And Pete was really generous.
No, I wouldn't. I'm not saying that I know like some street thing or knowing you guys or whatever. Like that comes across in the film. That's where I got it from.
No, I understand.
He says that.
No, he does. And I think he was really giving in that, but I can, and he actually acknowledges in one of the interviews, he says something like, I think back then I was so young that I just wanted to control every element of his output.
I get that.
Now I've relaxed and I realise I can guide him and help navigate, but I don't have to control everything. And I think we all do that early in our careers. Like it's your relationship to your own ego. Like sometimes you make decisions based on, I must look like this or seem like this, or
I've talked about
I must
this.
be right.
It's come up a lot in the show, like that energy of the early days when things start happening for you and stuff. Yeah, there's a lot.
We've all had our learnings in that, right?
And also, I mean, like, it's an interesting story in that I had no idea. Like, for someone, and this is probably more Scribe to talk about, but for someone to get into kind of needle drugs in their teenage years, like that's quite out there. I had no idea there was that prehistory before he found all the fame. So there's already quite a, that to me, that's quite a depth of addiction at quite a young age.
Absolutely.
That's an extreme, right, in terms of the things people get up to.
Totally. And it was fascinating for me because
you wouldn't have known this 20 years ago, right?
No, not at all.
Yeah,
so I know him well, and I know a lot about him that other people don't. But then I'm doing the interviews and I'm looking at a monitor and I'm behind a black curtain because I'm asking them I'm conversationally interviewing them, and I've got partially a bit of a notes list, but I'm essentially following a conversation just like we are.
Yeah.
And he looking at the monitor and just kind of seeing them say things, and I'm listening to it with headphones going like, oh my God.
Why are you behind a curtain? Is that a decision?
So they can't, so they're looking at the camera, and if they can see me off camera, then their eyes always glance to me. So it's like literally putting on blinders. Right. I'm just hiding, so they can hear me only 10 feet away, but I'm looking at them on a monitor.
I picture you on one of those old things they used to take photos in.
It's not that different. It's almost like chucking a cape over my head. Yeah.
Sorry, it's almost to your key point.
Yeah, but basically that, and then sometimes I don't even know what I'm asking or what's going to happen. I mean, when I ask Lady, like, well, what do you remember from that time? Like, when did you figure out that he was using? And she looks down at the ground and she goes, oh, I remember when he was a teenager, and I just remember, and then she pauses, and then she bursts into tears. And I've
powerful.
Triggered a memory that I didn't even know was there, and I just want to jump up and hug her because I know her well, but it's like I've got to let the cameras roll, and I take some tissues over to her and rub her back, and I'm like, are you okay to keep going? And then she continues, and it's amazing.
And so, because we kind of know more about how to deal with mental health and trauma and so on these days, obviously nowhere near perfect. We'll know more and more as we develop as a species or whatever we are. But and again, something I'd not thought of till you mentioned that. Did you have to did the production company put measures in place after the piece to kind of like give people other support if they needed it or whatever?
Yeah, we actually originally had kind of like a kind of an addiction expert, for lack of better words, a kind of consultant to look at the documentary, and then we also ended up sharing the series with head woman of the rehab that actually dealt with Scribe,
Right.
and she's also very quietly gotten kind of a Queen's Merit Award and things. Like, she's incredible, top of her game.
So you got public health experts in that area to look at it.
Yeah, because we were like, well, he's talking about suicidal thoughts and all kinds of states of being in total darkness and deep meth addiction and wanting to give up and losing his family and all this stuff. And a lot of the content will actually be quite triggering for an unknown audience. So we were literally just almost, we were essentially getting reflection from them to get a sense of professional approval that, yes, it's on the border, but it's doing more good than risk, and you should keep it as is, as opposed to. But we were expecting to possibly. Expecting to possibly change things, but we didn't in the end, including some of the.
That's great.
Worst,
so your intuitions fit with what they, as experts, thought was the approach to take.
But we knew we had a responsibility, and Scribe was very clear on that. Yeah,
because you just made me think of. This has always irked me, like when there's a piece that's sort of an advocacy thing or a thing about warning about addiction or whatever, and they'll have like a shot of a meth pipe, or they'll have a gambling one with like ding 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 with poker machines. So I always go, well, that's just like going to completely trigger someone if they're.
Yeah, and Scribe talks about that in the doco. He actually says, like, if I suddenly see a glass pipe on TV, that can trigger me to want to relapse. Like, I could just go down the road and get it.
Yeah,
like, it gives me that feeling.
Pavlov's dog.
It is completely.
Style.
So, like a neurological ignition, kind of going like, I want that, or that feeling that I know, and I can't relate to that in terms of meth. But it's like, if you have a traumatic
chocolate biscuits, on the other hand.
Yeah, well, I mean, I've experienced enough serious earthquakes to be traumatized by then that sometimes if I'm in a car park and the car park shakes from trucks or an elevator, that feeling of like, oh my God, I'm in danger, that comes back, and that's from earthquakes, not from elevators.
Yeah.
It's strange.
Have you, we'll finish on up shortly, but have you talked a lot since the Scribe doco like this? Like, I know you talked to Charlotte from RNZ. What I'm basically getting at is, have you been telling the same stories over and over about the doco? Or?
A little bit, not much. I've only done a few interviews, to be honest. It's like I did Spin-Off, I did Charlotte, Ryan, and that was pretty much it. I think. Marlo was selective about who he spoke to, but we haven't done a lot. And the word of mouth on the series has really travelled. Like, it's done huge numbers for TVNZ, and they're stoked. They gave us the numbers and said, don't announce these to the public, but we're really happy.
Great.
And it's now been...
Netflix don't, so that's great that they do.
Yeah, and so...
Were you like, wow? Were you like, wow? Like, great.
It's been out a fortnight, and I'm really... I thought I even emailed the producer to see what the numbers were today, to see what the second week was, but in a nutshell, it's looking like it's
exclusive.
No, it's looking like about 500,000 views in 2 weeks.
Hell.
And for TV, for on demand, where people have to click on their remote and go to a certain section and choose what it is.
For the population size of New Zealand, that's extraordinary.
It's massive. So we're really thrilled, and I'm really, and honestly, like, more than kind of acclaim or anything, Marlo called me a couple of days ago, and he, on his own accord, is just like, I just want to thank you again. Like, it's incredible. I love you. Everything you've done.
That's beautiful.
And it was like really touching, because he initiated all of that, and we were talking about the numbers, but we were both like, because he was saying how many more, he sometimes puts them on social, but how many messages he got of people that were willing to give up, that have chosen not to, or been inspired by the doco or whatever. And I was like, have you screenshotted these? Have you got a collection of these? Because I'd love to. And he's like, I'll be in Auckland next week. Let's have dinner. I'll show them. We can have dinner and I can show them.
So he's great. And so hopefully this is like more, fuel's not the right word, but hopefully it's more... strength around his recovery, like the response to this, and the way, it
may up his own accountability to remain sober, which, I mean, he's been sober for a year, and I've seen that change happen, so it may really lock it in for him.
And another observation, which I presume everyone would have had watching it, and which you guys would have known, who've known him for years, but where I hope that it opens more doors for him if he wants them. Like, it's really clear in that documentary that it isn't just that he's a really talented rapper. Like, he's got that thing, that X factor. Like, his eloquence, his warmth, you can tell he's one of those guys who can command a room if he wants to, know.
Absolutely, yeah.
So I think it's really important that came out as well, because it didn't surprise me for a second, but I didn't know about it till I saw it, right?
And incredible journey for him. But I mean, people speak on that.
People like him, you know.
And just how he can command the room. Like, there was a lot of rappers that, even though it was early on, there was a lot of people doing rap, but when he got on stage, he had crowd control and presence presence, and everybody speaks about how he had that X factor. And then when you go back to his childhood, it's like Dallas and Lady Six and other people going, he was that guy. He was the guy doing the Michael Jackson moonwalk and singing Elvis songs, and he was always performing.
But he's the guy that you charm your nana and it wouldn't be cheesy. He's that guy.
Well, do you see, it's interesting because other people have pointed this out to me, but there's a little moment in the documentary that you'll see where we're filming him in his neighbourhood. He's in front of his house talking about all the domestic violence and all the horrible things that happen.
Yeah, the woman pulls up. Everyone knows that scene.
The neighbour honks and pulls over, and there's Judy. And Judy's like Pakeha, next door neighbour, and he's like, Judy! And you can hear, like, I think maybe...
She goes, well, you used to come and hop into my bed, and he goes,
exactly.
He makes some little quip like, hey, just to make it really clear.
Yeah.
I was
He's
a little
like,
kid.
hang on. And it's like, you're 2 years old.
Yeah.
And
You know. Everyone goes, phew.
And then when she leaves, he's like, well, yeah, when my dad used to beat my mum or my brother or me, I used to run away and go climb into bed with her. And that was his safe place.
You kind of used that to open up the whole story, right?
Yeah, incredible. But I think it might have been Grant Smithies or somebody, but they just commented about how they saw a shift in his behaviour. And Scribe talks openly about this. He's like, listen, if you're brown and you grow up in Christchurch, you know how to talk to white people and you know how to behave in the white world.
Code shifting.
And that
for survival.
Kind of sounds incredibly sad that that's necessary, but it's a reality and he's acknowledging it. And you see, so when you talk about his charisma, like, yeah, he's got all of that, but you can imagine he behaves differently in a trap house with his meth friends than he does meeting Judy on the street. It's like,
that's really interesting observation.
Live in those worlds, He can do it all like that.
Hey, well, listen, man, you've been a very generous guest, and this is kind of written itself. So I hope you enjoyed it.
Yeah, no, it's been great.
And I was stoked that you said you'd listened to a few already. That's always a good start.
Yeah, no, it's awesome. No, I see him on Facebook, and I was talking to Tim Ward this afternoon, and
did one with him.
Yeah, I know exactly. I was like, I listened to your one. I'm down in Wellington next week, so funny actually.
Great.
But yeah, no, it's been great.